The senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, has won the Republican caucuses in Iowa. He won with 28% of the vote compared to 24% for businessman Donald Trump. Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida, came in third place with 23% of the votes. He could easily get the support of the Republican establishment, as his views are considered more moderate than the ones of Cruz and Trump. Speaking at a rally, Trump congratulated Cruz and said that he was pleased with his second place.
I was told by everybody, do not go to Iowa. You could never finish even in the top 10. And I said, but I have friends in Iowa. I know a lot of people in Iowa. I think they'll really like me. Let's give it a shot. They said, don't do it. I said, I have to do it. And we finished second. And I want to tell you something. I'm just honored. I'm really honored. And I want to congratulate Ted, and I want to congratulate all of the incredible candidates, including Mike Huckabee, who's become a really good friend of mine. So congratulations to everybody.
Cruz gained momentum in the last few weeks of his campaign in Iowa. He had the support of the Christian evangelical voters who often determine the Republican winner in the caucuses. In the Democratic race, Hillary Clinton has won by a tiny margin against U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders.
Wow, what a night! An unbelievable night! What a great campaign. This has been an incredible honor to campaign across Iowa with so many of you to make the case for the kind of future we want for the Democratic Party and for the United States of America.
It was the closest result in the Iowa Democratic Caucus history. With almost all the votes counted, Clinton leads with 50.1% to Sanders' 49.3%. Bernie Sanders, who described himself as a democratic socialist, told his supporters that they have begun a political revolution.
Joining me to discuss that final story about the beginning of the race to choose a Democratic and a Republican candidate for the US presidential election is our political correspondent, Davide Salvi. Before we speak to Davide, though, let's take a quick look at what you've been saying about the caucus results in Iowa. There's been a mixed reaction. AJ tweets, life in Iowa must be really bleak if they look at Ted Cruz and think he looks like he could improve our existence. But Chris DePalma is more than happy with the outcome. He writes, thank you, Iowa. Real conservatives speaking up and voting for a real leader, Ted Cruz, 2016. Well, Davide, I mean, Donald Trump was described as the front runner in the polls. Why didn't he become the front runner and stay the front runner?
Yeah, obviously this is a very bad result for Donald Trump, who came second. The reason, in my opinion, is very simple. He scared many voters away from the polls. Many voters felt, a bit concerned about his rhetoric against Washington, against the Republican establishment, against all the other candidates, and so they decided to stay at home or not to vote from him. What happens, very interestingly, is yesterday there was a number in the media was coming across, and they were saying that if less than 135,000 voters would have gone to the polls, that would have been a great advantage for Ted Cruz. If more than these number of voters would have gone and voted in the polls, that would have been an advantage for Donald Trump, because obviously Donald Trump would have benefited not from the grassroots voters, but from mobilizing many voters who never voted in primaries before. But interestingly enough, the number of voters was above this number, above 135,000 voters, and still Trump got second.
So
and
people came out.
They came out.
Yes,
yes. They came out. They voted. This is an historic turnout for the Republican primaries, but still, it wasn't enough for Donald Trump to win.
Well, he was called the politics of fear, but people were afraid of him.
Yeah. Exactly. They were afraid of him, but still they voted for Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz's rhetoric is very different from Donald Trump, but his program, his platform is not completely different than Trump's. He's still very conservative in terms of fiscal policy, in terms of social policies. He's very conservative, and he, of course, won these primaries against Trump, who's still very conservative, but also he has his, let's call it, spicy rhetoric.
But that brings me on, of course, to the third candidate, Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, who was only 1 percentage point behind Trump. Now, some people are saying he's the sort of establishment candidate. He's not like Cruz and Trump, and that now people see that he's got a lot of vote-winning potential. The big money, the party bosses and so on will go behind him.
Yeah.
Do you think that is likely?
That can happen. That could potentially happen. This, of course, is Marco Rubio is the biggest surprise of the election night, both in the Republican and the Democratic race. No one was expecting such a high result. Yes, he can become the anti-Trump candidate and the anti-extremism candidate, if you want to call, like, you know, right-wing candidates. He's still very right-wing. He's one of those senators who was elected in 2010 when the intake of the famous Tea Party, you know, the Tea Party in the United States, the right-wing fringe of the Republican Party, and he got elected with that. But he still is the most institutionalized candidate, and he's the most presidential. He has the best presidential outlook than all the other Republican candidates together, at least. That's what seems to be happening. And yes, many of the Republican establishments can converge and support him in the next few primaries. He's playing a strategy. Observers call it like the 3-2-1 strategy. What does it mean? It means his goal was to arrive third in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, where the primaries will be held next week, and first in North Carolina, where voters will go and vote in a couple of weeks.
Well, let's turn now to the Democrats. I mean, we saw Hillary Clinton on the screen there saying this had been a great night, but she seemed to be saying it rather through clenched teeth, because she was expected and was hoping to win massively.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think this is a very serious blow to her?
Well, it's not been a serious blow yet. Of course, she got more delegates than Bernie Sanders, her opponent. It was not a great result for her, but still, also Bernie Sanders, if you want to seriously challenge Hillary Clinton, he needs to win more states than just Iowa and possibly New Hampshire. He needs to do better and to perform better in those states where Hillary Clinton is still strong, like South Carolina, where the majority of the voters of the Democratic voters are black. He's not polling very well with minorities and with black voters in general. He's slightly ahead in the polls in Nevada, but still the majority of the states, according to the polls, are suggesting that Hillary Clinton will have a majority of the votes and delegates in the convention this summer.
So that even if she loses New Hampshire next week, she can carry on and do.
Yeah, that's what probably will happen. According to many polls, Bernie Sanders is ahead of Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. He has 90% likelihood of winning the primary elections in New Hampshire. Of course, Hillary Clinton still, she can challenge him very well. What happened in 2008 was, you remember, during the New Hampshire primaries, Hillary Clinton was defeated by Barack Obama in 2008 in Iowa. Obama won the Iowa caucuses, but then she won New Hampshire because she battled constituency by constituency, delegate by delegate. So that was a very surprising result, and everything can still happen in New Hampshire. So it's not a closed race.
And it's too far, of course, to look ahead to the actual November contest for the candidate for the presidency. But let's say it was Rubio versus Clinton. I mean, the Democrats traditionally get the Latino vote, and her husband got it big time earlier when he was running. But Rubio is, of course, a Latino himself.
Yeah,
do you think he will change the whole dynamic and a lot of Latinos will go for him?
I don't think the dynamics will change completely. Of course, he could be a better challenger to Hillary Clinton for the Latino votes than most of other candidates. But don't forget that, for instance, Jeb Bush polls very well as well among Latino voters. He is married to a Latino woman. So of course, Rubio is the best challenger again within Latinos voters, but it's not. This will not determine, at least in my opinion, the result of the elections. Of course, he comes from Florida, and Florida is one of the swing states, and it's very important to win Florida for every candidate. You remember in 2000 elections, Al Gore won the majority of the votes, but lost Florida, so he had less delegates, and he eventually didn't become president of the United States just for that reason. So that could happen, but because Marco Rubio is actually from a swing state, which is very important to win for every single candidate.
Well, thank you very much, Davide Salvi.